there's things that we hide about ourselves that we don't want anyone to know. And those things are the things that keep us the sickest. When I grew up, my dad left when I was 2 years old. I didn't have a father figure for the most part. Some people would fill in here and there, but a lot of times it turned into toxic relationships, the things that really a kid shouldn't be exposed to. It made me really insecure at a young age. It made me feel unsafe. And I know a lot of my journey, I was trying to feel safe. I didn't really ever feel safe until I started drinking, started smoking weed and experimenting with other things. I found a group of friends that like to do that too, so I felt safe with them. I felt like I was in control of the way I felt for the first time in my life. And that kept going because I didn't really know how else to do it. Being around people who were drinking all the time, and even though I was seeing, that their behavior was inappropriate or violent or whatever it may be at the time, what I ended up realizing is that they drank because that's the only way that they could be happy. So I really learned that, once I first tried drinking, when that was going on, being around the arguments and the fighting and everything else, I realized I didn't care as much. I could hide away in my room, I could smoke cigarettes out my window and take shots of vodka until I went to sleep. I would wake up and I would do it again. You hide things all your life, you start to think that you're smarter than other people and that, you got something on them, or you're a step ahead, but in reality, you're hiding things from yourself. Anyway, there's a lot of different phases of my addiction, but I ended up in treatment after my friend died. He actually overdosed in my room, and I didn't really know where to go after that. And I ended up calling my dad, and I ended up telling him that I had an addiction to heroin. There I got introduced to recovery, and I got introduced to, AA, and there was things I liked about it, and it took me a little while to get my feet going, but eventually I did. I started to work a spiritual program. I started to learn how I could love myself. I love other people. Anyway, it worked for a while. I ended up having 19 months clean. In that time, I met my ex-wife, and I looked pretty successful, but I'd fallen back into my addiction. It was very slow, but it was sure. Without any spiritual help, without any knowledge of my actual condition, there was really nowhere to go but inevitably relapsing again. I started smoking weed again. I started doing kratom. I started drinking here and there until it was drinking every night. I remember coming home one day and all my pets were gone, and my ex-wife's bags were packed, and it was the loneliest I've ever felt. And I wanted to hurt myself, and I knew that this was coming anyway. I knew if I didn't stop that this was going to happen. And I wish I would have sought out help at the time. Instead, I was going to strip clubs and blew all the money I had in about 9 days. I ended up calling 911 because I was scared for my life, and not, I didn't really have a plan to kill myself, but I was actively trying to. I looked around and felt like I was doomed. That's when I ended up in the hospital the night before I went to Compassion Behavioral Health. And I left them a message, and they got back to me the next day, and I had never been happier to be picked up by a treatment center in my life. I felt like I was already safe as soon as the staff got there, and I continued to feel that way, and I continued to just put my faith in the program. I'm always going to remember my therapist telling me, oh, you have anxiety, you have anxiety. And I remember seeing that general anxiety disorder, as a part of my treatment plan. And I said, no, there's no way. Like, I just get anxious when I'm coming off of drugs, when I'm first in early recovery, but then it goes away. My therapist spent probably weeks trying to convince me that I had anxiety. One of the down groups on the weekend, we watched this movie called Inside Out 2, and it's a funny little Pixar movie. Character named Anxiety, one of the emotions, and she's, he's basically controlling this girl, and the other emotions are trying to get in the way and stop it. And one of the emotions, joy, comes into this tornado of chaos, anxiety, and stops it for a second and says to anxiety that you don't get to control what Riley does. Riley was a character that's also my sister's name, so it meant a little bit more that it was like that. But and I just realized that, that for the past 22 years of my life or so, that I think that anxiety has been ruling my life. That cleared a lot of things up. Something that I almost felt robbed of my whole life, not realizing that I had this disorder. There's things that we hide about ourselves that we don't want anyone to know. And those things are the things that keep us the sickest. And I thought that there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to stop. I thought that, no matter how much my relationship with God has grown, no matter how hard I try to do this, no matter how many times I work the steps, no matter how many times I get somebody's number at a meeting, it's just not for me. It's not going to work for me. But I didn't realize at the time I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to be honest about. But until I went back to compassion, I did not think I really stood a chance. Even when I first got there, I thought, I hope these people can help me, because I don't know how to help myself anymore.